Welcome everyone to the What to Do with a PhD panel for the DPAC HBCU mentoring group. And we're really excited that you are all joining us here today. Just a few quick things before I hand it over to our very lovely panel of PhDs. At the bottom of the screen, you can see currently is QR codes for both the LinkedIn and the YouTube page. So follow the LinkedIn page so you can get notifications about upcoming workshops, research opportunities, job opportunities, any available opportunities for HBCU STEM students. Also, the YouTube page has recordings of all of the past workshops, so you can check that out if you missed any of the previous ones. As you probably all heard, the session will be recorded. We're going to stop that recording at the end of the panelists' presentations. So students can feel free to ask questions, turn on your cameras and unmute yourself. The recording will stop at that point. And during the presentations, feel free to post any of your questions in the chat. I have the chat window open, so in case any of the panelists don't see the questions, I can chime in and make sure that those get answered. So with that, if nothing else, I'm going to get us started. We're going to go left to right order. So we're going to start off with Claudia, who's Senior Patent Agent, Cooley LLP. And I'm going to just let me know when you want the slides to advance and I will move them along.
Thank you. Hi all, it's good to meet you. I'm on Zoom here. I'm here to go over a career in patent law, specifically as a patent agent. Next slide, please. So first of all, I was going to give a quick introduction of who I am, just in case that wasn't clear on the invite. Next slide. So I guess here just general background information on my education and what I do at the law firm. So I started my career in Texas, specifically in Austin, where I got a bachelor's degree at UT Austin. And then I moved to Houston and I got a PhD at Baylor, specifically in T-cell therapy. And then from there, I moved to the DC area where I currently reside. And I did a postdoc at the NIH and NCI, specifically focused on T cells. And now I am a student at law school. And after the PhD, I transitioned into a job at a firm where I started off as a scientific advisor. Essentially, at that stage, I just had a PhD, and from there, I moved up. Next slide, please. All right, so I just wanted to give you a description of what a patent agent is and generally what you would do in a career in patent law. Next slide. So just as a brief background, a patent, I'm not sure if you're familiar with what this is, but essentially a patent is this license to sue. So an inventor prepares a patent application in conjunction with a firm or like a patent agent or associate. And what it is it's essentially a large document that has the disclosure of an invention. And the right to sue comes from the US Constitution. And there essentially it gives the inventors the rights to stop other people on infringing on what is described in the patent. Next slide. So essentially, patent law, this is a career that is on the intersection of law, business, and science. And this is because as a patent agent or a patent associate, you are helping a company or inventors try and obtain patent protection. And in doing so, this also it implicates aspects of business and the law, and obviously in science as well. Next slide, please. All right, so a patent agent, and what do I do? So specifically, I'm focused on patent prosecution. And what this is basically from the first step where you speak with a scientific team or an inventor, and here you would discuss what their inventive idea is. And in doing so, you may have calls or a review, a disclosure. It could be a scientific paper, stuff like that. And from there, you would prepare a patent application. So the patent application describes the invention in full. So it resembles like a scientific paper. It has pages and pages of disclosure. It may have data. And from there, after you file the patent application, you do not just get a patent, you have to go back and forth with the patent office. And in doing so, you have to convince the patent office that the invention is new, is not obvious, and should therefore be awarded a patent. All right, next slide, please. All right, so there's just a question here on what do you have to do to enter this field? Next slide, please. So specifically in prosecution, because this aspect of patent law is on the front end, essentially your communications are with the scientific team, often is with the CSO. So in order to understand the science and what they're doing and what they're inventing, you really do have to have a PhD or, specifically a science degree. It could be engineering. It depends on what field of patents you're interested in. So after you obtain a science degree, you can start at a firm as a scientific advisor. And essentially, at this stage, you can learn how to draft a patent application and stuff like that. The next stage would be to pass the patent bar exam. So the patent bar exam is a 6-hour test that tests your ability to understand the laws, specifically before the patent office in the US. So the US Patent Office has a large manual. It's thousands and thousands of pages that describes the law in relation to patents. And they have this exam. And in order to sign up for the exam, you have to have a degree in science. And if your degree is in science and in biology specifically, it has to be a PhD. So essentially, before you can even consider a career as a patent agent or as a patent associate, you should have a PhD. And so once you pass the bar exam, then you can begin working as a patent agent at a firm. And then if you decide to go to law school, you can become a patent attorney. So essentially, the difference between a patent agent and a patent attorney is that the attorney has gone to law school and has a state bar exam. So contrary to patent prosecution, you could also go into litigation. And litigation is where you would enforce the patent. And so people that go into litigation are typically associates or attorneys. And to practice in that space, you do not have to have a patent bar. So in that case, if you want to go from a bachelor's into law school and then go into litigation, that is an option. All right, next slide, please. So this is a slide on, is this a right job for you? So there are some considerations here. Specifically, the pros are it's highly paid, so that's definitely a pro. It's also interesting, it's fast paced. One of the things that I enjoy about it is speaking with the scientific team and understanding the product that they're trying to patent. I think this is the more exciting aspect of it. And next slide, please. This career, specifically with regard to working at a law firm, is pretty demanding. The work can be unpredictable, and it's unpredictable because of the way the patent law exists. So essentially, the law awards those that have prepared and filed a patent application first. So therefore, if you have a scientist who approaches you with an invention, you have to get it on file quickly. And so you can't really predict when they will come to you, if they're going to make a disclosure at a scientific conference, stuff like that. the application should be on file before the disclosure is out in the public. So because of that, the work can be unpredictable. As I said, the specifications are pretty large documents. So in order to prepare that, it requires a lot of review, writing, stuff like that. So if you like to do that type of work, for writing specifically, this would be a great job. The next bullet point, the little room for error. And so this exists because as a representative to a client in a firm, they're expecting you to do your job essentially. So you really have to review everything and confirm when it's filed before the patent office, it's essentially, as perfect as possible. The limited time off, I think that goes back to the work being demanding. So in that aspect, as I said, you are representing a client, and so that person is depending on you to be there. So if they give you a call or send you an email, they expect you to respond. So that aspect can also be a little bit challenging. And I think that's it. Could you go to the next slide? I think I covered everything.
Thank you. Does anyone? So next up, we're going to go with Miriam, who is an AAS Science and Tech Policy Fellow.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for the two speakers who came before me. So I'm actually, I think of the speakers, I may be the speaker who is closest in that I've been out of grad school for 3 years now. So I thought I should start off by sharing how I got interested in science, pursuing a career in science policy while I was in grad school. So I actually was a grad student at Hopkins in the biomedical, in the BCMB program. And so while I was there, I did a lot of activities outside of the lab that related to supporting my fellow graduate students and also improving science education at multiple levels. And so it was actually when I was the president of the Biomedical Scholars Association, so shout out to BSA, that I had the pleasure of hearing about a person who was pursuing or had a career in science policy during our diverse careers in science panel one night. And during that panel, I learned that I could possibly pursue a career in science policy. And so from there, I started seeking opportunities that would allow me to do so. And one of the first things I did was I pursued a AAAS PACE workshop. And so that is catalyzing advocacy in science and engineering. It's a 2-day workshop that teaches graduate students and some higher level undergrads about what science policy entails. And so it was there that I learned about science, the difference between science for policy and policy for science. And so science for policy is when you use the things that we learn in science to create new policies. And policies for science is when policies shape how we conduct science, the science that we do. And so from there, in my last year of my graduate experience, I actually decided to pursue the Mirzayan Fellowship at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And so I actually joined the board on the Policy and Global Affairs Division, and was on the board on higher education and workforce. And I got to use some of the skills that I gained in grad school to work on a consensus study entitled Supporting the Whole Student, Mental Health, Substance Abuse, and Wellbeing in Higher Education. And there I scoured the literature to look for gaps and best practices on how minority serving institutions, specifically Hispanic serving institutions, support their students in both their mental health and well-being, and the resources that they provide for substance abuse. And so I presented that to the Consensus Study Board and realized that it was something that I really enjoyed doing. I really enjoyed summarizing what was in the literature. I really enjoyed being able to provide the information back to the Consensus Study members in a way that was easy for them to move along and make recommendations with. So after I graduated, I'm sorry, I think there's some noise in the background, but after I graduated, I pursued the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship And so I decided that in joining AAAS that I wanted to, so the National Academies puts forth recommendations to federal agencies and other agencies that fund their work. And I really wanted to see or experience how a federal agency will actually implement the recommendations that get put forward from an organization such as the National Academies. And so my goal in becoming a AAAS fellow was to join an office that would allow me to have a bird's eye view of how policy is actually implemented at that organization. And so I joined the NIH in the Office of Science Policy, and I am currently a second-year fellow. I have had the opportunity to do many wonderful, great things. But one of the main things I do is I actually lead overarching agency coordination on all things related to the White House. And so there I get to follow and track things that are happening on the National Science and Technology Council. And I also track the President's Council of Advisories in Science and Technology. And so from this experience, I have really been able to figure out what are the things that I really enjoy from my work, what are the skills that I still want to gain. And as a second-year fellow, I'm hoping that my office will, hire me on. And I just want to share with you all that science policy is broad and encompasses a lot of work. So a lot of different work in at different places. So while I'm at the NIH, which is a government agency, science policy can be conducted in industry. It can be conducted in law. It can be even conducted at the institutions that you are currently at. So I just want to leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you so much. And like I said, if you have any questions for our panelists, throw them into the chat. We'll get to them at the end. I'm going to pull back up the slides really quick, and then we will continue on. Great. So I'm going to do my best, but if I say your name wrong, please correct me. Odalis, who is the Director of Research at CUNY and BMCC.
Awesome. I think the wrong slide is up. Odalis. So you did a pretty good job.
I was like, go back. Here we go. Sorry about that.
No worries. So good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I still have Odalis Walwyn Pollard. I've been going back and forth between hyphenating and just taking my partner's last name. But my name is Odalis Pollard. And so I kind of want to go through my pathway to where I got to today, because I think it's not really a straight line, but it makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. So I think it started in the very beginning. I was born and raised in the U.S. Virgin Islands. You can click. And for those who are unfamiliar, it's a small set of islands southeast of Puerto Rico. I'm from the large island called St. Croix, about 60,000 people in population. But my parents actually migrated from the U.S. From St. Kitts and Nevis to the U.S. Virgin Islands in the 70s or 80s to become U.S. citizens. To have a better life for their children. And neither of them attended college. I don't think my dad completed high school. So they're very much into making sure that their education was forefront, as they weren't able to have those opportunities getting when they were older. Next slide. So as a young child, I realized that I really do enjoy science and math. I was very competitive in school. I remember in the first grade competing with some of my classmates for, I believe it was a science test, and the person with the top grade got ice cream sundaes, and I got the ice cream sundae. So I was very motivated to do well, also motivated by my parents to do well. It wasn't until middle school when I had the opportunity to join the science fair, where I really decided that this was the thing I wanted to go into. And I won first place in that science fair. And so from middle school, I was set like, yes, my career is going to be in science and math. Growing up in a Caribbean household, usually if you have a knack for math and science, the first thing they do is, push you to become a medical doctor. And that's pretty much all I knew. And so I went on to middle school and high school thinking that I was going to become a medical physician. And because I was very interested and enjoyed teaching and being around children, I did a lot of, summer camps. I thought I would want to be a pediatrician. So I went on to college. What's the next slide? So I attended University of the Virgin Islands, which is known as the Caribbean only HBCU, if you all are planning to, transfer to somewhere that's nicer weather. And I majored in biology. And so it was at this point where I had the opportunity to kind of test the waters and figure out if medical school was the way I wanted to go. So I remember my first summer as an undergrad, I volunteered I had a summer job at the hospital. And I hated it. I hated everything about it. I hated the environment. And I kind of panicked because, I'm majoring in biology. I did a lot of tutoring. I was doing all these side things. And I remember in I think it was my junior year, I went to one of my advisors and I told them my dilemma. Hey, I came in thinking I wanted to go into medical school. And now I know that's not the path I want to take. Are there any other options? And I really want to leave the island. I want to explore and see what else is out there. And so that's when she mentioned joining or going into a post-baccalaureate research program. And so that took me from St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, to the next slide, to the University of Rochester Medical Center. And so this was kind of the first opportunity I had to do real hands-on research where I kind of developed the question. I was guided by my mentors. My work was around microbiology and immunology, working on vaccine development for the flu and HIV. Neither of those projects work out as science goes because it incorporates a lot of failures. But I really enjoyed, having my own schedule, developing these questions. When they do work, it was, very exciting. It was, that 1% of things working out that really kind of pushed me to saying, I really enjoy this roller coaster of emotions being a potential scientist. And so I decided at that point to go on to my PhD. I think you can click. But I also wanted to point that mentors, I think, were very important along the route of me attaining my goals to become a PhD scientist. And this was Dr. Dewhurst, who was my first PI on my journey to school. And he really encouraged me to move on to the next step. So I moved from Rochester to Westchester, New York, where I was at New York Medical College. And this picture is blurry because it was taken some time ago. And there I did microbiology and immunology. Initially, I started working on a project on group A strep, just trying to figure out how routes of infection work with group A strep infection in the throat versus the skin. And then I transitioned over to working on a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii, doing a number of different mutagenesis experiments in mice to try to determine how this parasite has the ability to evade the immune response. And so here I am, being the first in my family, not just to graduate college, but graduate a post-graduate education. So being the first doctor in my immediate family. We were very excited. And during this journey, I think was when I tried to figure out where my next step was. I think one of the downsides and good sides of attaining a PhD in science is that there are many options out there. And so while I was a graduate student, I actually founded a research program for minoritized students in the community. I remember mentoring a high school student in my laboratory because he had a connection to my PI, whose parent was a physician in the hospital. And I was tutoring students in the Science Technology Entry Program, or STEP program, which is a state-funded program for students from these underserved communities. And there was a number of them that really wanted to get the opportunity to do hands-on research, but had no idea how to navigate that. So myself and another PhD student at the time went to the dean, told them our idea. We spoke to different PIs at the school. We found an advisor. We recruited students from neighboring high schools. And, I'm proud to say a number of them have actually continued on in STEM and doing amazing things. So it was really nice to see that. And alongside doing the STEP and, doing outreach, I did outreach at the Juvenile Center as well. I was an adjunct professor at Pace University for a few years. So I kind of decided at that point that even though I enjoyed science, I enjoyed engaging with different audiences in order to make science an attainable and fun route for them to go into. These are just some fun photos. And so at the end, I remember deciding between going into a postdoc, which is basically additional training for your PhD. I kind of aligned that with doing residency if you're a medical physician, or going into teaching. And I remember my mentor, Dr. Mordew, who was in the previous slide, she said, I know that you don't want to be at the bench for the rest of your career, I think you should take this visiting assistant professor position in Albany. So that's when I moved on to Albany at Albany College of Pharmacy. And I was their assistant professor in the microbiology and immunology department. I really enjoyed doing that aspect of work, more so enjoyed doing the lab portion of the work, where I've given students these ideas and ways to really learn the subject, but apply it to their everyday lives and to increase their critical thinking skills. But at the same time, I was still involved with STEP. I found a STEP program in the area at Albany Medical College. I was their research professor, where I was also working with high school students with their science projects and being kind of their liaison between their PI. Sorry, I have no childcare today, so there might be some noise in the background. And so while I was doing this, I think there was one night where I came home and I said, I think I want to go into science outreach full time. You can click the slide. So here I am with some of the STEP students from that area. And then I applied to a couple other science fairs. This was one of my mentees who won 3rd place at the STEP Science Fair. And so that's how I ended up at, and here are some of my other mentees as well. And so I ended up at Rockefeller University at their Rocky DU Science Outreach Program, deciding this was the path I wanted to go along. And so here I had the opportunity to do a number of different things. Not only were we managing a number of different programs to increase accessibility to science to different groups, we worked with middle school, high school students. We also worked with their teachers with professional development courses. We also worked with scientists at the university to adopt their projects that's student friendly. We helped train scientists to mentor students as well. And being there for about 5 years, I was also able to do little side scientific projects. I'm sorry. There you go. A number of different projects with students. And I was there for about 6 years when I decided, the pandemic and everything kind of happened and we kind of have to rearrange our program. But I wanted to do something more. I think I kind of hit the ceiling in terms of engaging with the students that we were able to bring into our program. So for example, one program that I managed, I was only able to bring in about 16 students during that school year to train them, to train their scientists to be their facilitators. And so I decided I'm going to go into one of our city universities of New York. So I'm currently at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, which is short for CUNY BMCC. And there I'm now the director of research. So in this position, I wear many hats. So I think it's more of directing the programs than managing. The downside is that I don't get to engage with students as often as I would like. It's very administrative, but I get to provide all of these additional opportunities to these students. So for example, our office, this is some of my team on the right. Our Office of Research, we have several research programs for undergraduate students and STEPs and high school students, the STEP program being one of them. So that was kind of a complete 360 in terms of where I started and where I ended up. And we have other undergraduate research students. So we provide these research opportunities for students. We engage with faculty members to help them develop projects for their students. But I'm also doing a lot of administrative things. So I'm also the college's human research program HRPP coordinator. So anyone who has to submit like a research IRB, that initially comes through me. I determine whether or not it's exempt from IRB or send it off to full IRB approval. I also do a number of other research compliance things, such as their conflict of interest when they're getting funding for their grants. I also help faculty and staff develop their research proposals, trying to determine what grants and opportunities are out there for faculty members to attain the goals in terms of like student retention, student graduation, building partnerships with other four-year schools and other partnerships in the community. So we've developed partnerships with like the Hudson River Park, where they come and recruit students for internships. We also do other outreach projects with community events. So I'm kind of like wrapping around all of the things that I really enjoy doing in this position. So overall, I think my entire career pathway has been to improve access to STEM. And so I really want to, give students the opportunity who want to be exposed to STEM, giving them the good and the bad. But my saying is, you don't know what you want if you never had the opportunity to access it. You can click on the slide. And so, a couple of the things I want to make sure that students are actively learning. I want to encourage diverse students to pursue STEM, make sure that the environment that they're in is inclusive, and provide diverse examples of other STEM professionals, similar to this panel that we're doing here, of what they can attain and what they can go into with STEM. And I would say some of the cons, now I'm working for a government agency. It's not as not fast-paced, but it's not as quick as I would like it. There's a lot of bureaucracy in terms of what in terms of getting things done and putting things through different offices. But it also offers some flexibility. We are a unionized organization, so that is good as well. And we have a pension, and there are all these other really cool things that's involved in working with these public schools and universities. And yeah, I think the pro is that I still get to engage with the community I enjoy engaging with. And I have I'm really excited about what these students are doing. So far, all of our students have a 100% retention rate at the college, and I'm looking forward to seeing them progress in their careers.
Okay, thank you so much. And last up, though certainly not least, we have Gregory Carr, who's an associate professor at Johns Hopkins Medicine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited here to share a little bit of my career path and what I'm currently doing. You can advance to the next slide, please. So currently, I am an associate professor of pharmacology and molecular sciences at Johns Hopkins. I also have a joint appointment at the Lieber Institute for Brain Development, which is affiliated with Johns Hopkins. And the mission of the Lieber Institute is to increase our understanding of schizophrenia and related disorders and improve therapeutic options for patients. So within that context, I serve as the principal investigator for the in vivo pharmacology lab within the drug discovery and development group. And what we do broadly is we work to develop novel therapeutics for schizophrenia and, as I said, related disorders. So my group, I view really as kind of a behavioral pharmacology, behavioral neuroscience lab. We work with mice and rats to identify novel targets, potential targets for therapeutics, and then determine sort of efficacy and safety in these preclinical models so that then they could be advanced into drug discovery and drug development. So my position, I think, is somewhat similar to what you would see in a faculty position for School of Medicine. And so with that, I want to contrast that with what you may be familiar with at your college or university. So about 90% of my time is spent on research, and that includes designing experiments, working with the folks in the lab to interpret their data, keeping up with the literature, writing grant applications to keep the group funded. Very little of what I do is sort of formal teaching. So I have 4 lectures a year, not 4 classes. Some of my friends at liberal arts schools can't understand how I only get away with just having 4 lectures. But really the focus is on full-time research and research pretty much, as I said, about 90% of the time. So the next slide, I'll give you a sense for how I got to where I am. It started for me. I was born and raised in Providence, Rhode Island. And when I was looking at colleges, the only thing really that I wanted out of a college was that it needed to be a day's drive away from home. So I picked a small school in Ohio called Kenyon College. But this was actually, I think, a really fortuitous choice for me because what I didn't know about Kenyon when I went there, originally I was thinking maybe pre-med for a focus, was they had a really strong neuroscience department, and it was surprising for a school of only about 1,200 people. And so at Kenyon, I was really exposed to hands-on research in behavioral neuroscience. And I was actually fortunate enough, we had a project looking at social play behavior in juvenile rats. I was able to present this at the Society for Neuroscience annual meeting. And when I came back, my advisor was like, okay, what are you thinking you want to do for a career? And I said, whatever will allow me to go to this meeting every year. and he said, well, in that case, you probably want to look at grad school. And so on the next slide, I made my way from Ohio back closer to home in Philadelphia, and got my PhD in neuroscience at the University of Pennsylvania. And here, Penn was very different from Kenyon. It was a much larger program, but it sort of exposed me to really the breadth of neuroscience research. And what I found is that I was really drawn to psychiatry and psychiatric research. So at Penn, I worked on a drug discovery project looking at the kappa opioid receptor system in depression and anxiety. And from there, the next slide, I made my way down to NIH in Bethesda. And I sort of expanded in psychiatry a little bit. I was working in a large group. It was about 130 people, again, sort of full-time research. But it was really an interdisciplinary team of geneticists, clinicians, and those of us doing animal modeling work. And here I really got exposed to schizophrenia and the challenges of the disorder and the challenges of research within the space, and really caught my interest. And so after my postdoc, I was looking for faculty positions to start my lab. And on the next slide, you can see I traveled all the way up to Baltimore here to Hopkins and the Lieber Institute, where I've been really continuing the work that I started as a postdoc, looking to develop these novel therapeutics for the disorder. And really, as I said, my day-to-day is really focused on research. So if you're interested in how you get into a research-intensive faculty position, I can provide some insight onto that and sort of the path through the various training stages. And so I think in the interest of time, just to make sure we have a chance for as much question time as possible, I'll stop here, but I'll definitely be happy to answer any questions people have on this career path.